Good morning. The song we just heard performed by Christopher Fritchie is one that he composed himself. It's titled Who, and it's based on a very well-loved poem by Rumi. Now, Rumi did not give his poems any titles, and so often his poems are known by one or two sentences or a phrase from the poem. This particular poem is often referred to by the line in the poem that the people love the most. Unfold your own myth. Oh, we like that, I'm guessing because you and I, we enjoy the idea that there is an epic greatness in us, mythic, that we have some choice in. We like that. It got very quiet in here. Like people are, I hope he doesn't tell me it's not so. And the poem invites us to not be satisfied with stories of how things have gone for other people, but to step boldly into our own stories. Okay. There's a reference in the poem to a bucket being let down and bringing up a flowing prophet. It's a reference to Joseph. He was the dreaming prophet of the Bible. I guess that's why he's called a flowing prophet, because dreams are flowing, I guess. You remember Tim Rice and Andrew Lloyd Webber, the Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat? It's that story, the Bible story of the famous Jacob and his son Joseph, which illustrates how everything in life has significance, but a significance that reveals itself at its own right time. Joseph is the favorite son of Jacob, and Jacob's favoritism is what drives jealousy among all the other brothers, catastrophic jealousy. So one day, the other brothers are out tending the herd, and Jacob, the father, says to his favorite son, Joseph, I want you to go out to find your brothers and make sure everything's okay. Check up on them. And so Joseph goes out to find his brothers tending the sheep, but he can't find them. He gets lost. And he encounters a stranger. Now, remember last week, Rabbi George talked to us about what the stranger means in the Judaic system. Oh, so that was an epic message. Watch that online. Anyway, he encounters this stranger who asks Joseph, what are you looking for? And Joseph explains that he's looking for his brothers and that he's lost. And the stranger says, well, I overheard your brothers. They were talking and they said they were going to relocate and take the herd elsewhere. So he gives Joseph some direction. He helps him out. And he gets him to the right direction to find his brothers, who, by the way, have gotten so enraged with their jealousy that they're plotting to get rid of him. I mean, it's brutal. When he arrives, they're in the thick of their jealousy, and they decide, there's some conflict. They decide rather than kill him, they're going to throw him in the bottom of an empty well while they figure it out. And they leave him there. Jacob had no idea that when he was sending his son out, that might very well be the last time he would ever see him again. And the brothers go on and they encounter some traders, like slavers really, and they decide, we don't have to get our hands dirty with the blood of our brother. We'll just sell him into slavery. And they tell the slavers where their brother is, and the slavers go to the well, and they drop down the bucket, and they pull up a young man who is taken to Egypt, where he becomes the flowing prophet who interprets the dreams of the Pharaoh and saves the world. But before we get to that epic, mythologically great moment, let's look at the actor in the supporting role, the stranger who met him on the road, who gave him directions. That simple, seemingly meaningless act, it turns out, is very important. There's no account of who the stranger is. What was he doing there? Why was it important to include him in the story? They could have just said that They met up, the brothers and the son. What challenges was this stranger facing? Was he happy that day? Did he have a headache? Had he eaten? Was he carrying a burden in life? Was his family okay? Did he feel heard, seen, thanked, acknowledged? Was he a Democrat or a libertarian? We don't know a single thing about him. But without him, nothing happens. If Joseph had not met him, Joseph would not have found his brothers. Had Joseph not found his brothers, he would not have been thrown into a well and sold into slavery. Had he not been sold into slavery, he would not have been taken to Egypt. Had he not been taken to Egypt, he would not have found his way into the Pharaoh's court. Had he not done that, he would not have become the interpreter of dreams for the troubled Pharaoh. Had he not interpreted the dreams, he would not have saved Egypt from suffering during a famine. Had that not happened, Jacob's family would not have immigrated to Egypt. Had that not happened, the Israelites would not have migrated to Egypt. Had that not happened, Moses would never have been born, and neither would he have led them out. Had that not happened, there would be no 10 Commandments. Can one ordinary person really change things? Well, it turns out it's happening all the time, whether they know it or not. Not in the epic, mythological way we sometimes yearn for. That's why, in my opinion, the poem asks the question, who let the bucket down? And Christopher, in his interpretation, answers the question, it could be you. Oh, there's something so beautiful in that question. Who let the bucket down? Because the person who let the bucket down is not named. Just like the stranger who gave the directions, both essential but shadows in the background. You know, so many people, so many of us, we admire the main character in the movie. We like the hero, the lead, the heroine, or the villain. You know, those are the ones that capture our attention in a mythic, epic way. But who let the bucket down? It could be you. That time when you gave a stranger a helping hand with something they were struggling with. Or that time you gave directions to somebody who was clearly struggling with the language of the area. Or that time when you said sorry when doing so was difficult, but you did it to make a repair attempt. Or that time when you went without something so that your siblings or your children or your neighbors could have something. Or that time when you helped somebody in your team at work complete a task even though you needed to get going. Who is making this story of this movie possible? It could be you. No, it is you, but not always in the epic, mythic way most of us yearn for. Because people may not even know your name. They may not even know what part you're playing. And yet, without you, the story just doesn't happen. I recently watched a documentary. It's called The Last Watch. It's about Game of Thrones. And in it, you get to meet the crew and the supporting actors, the extras. And all of a sudden, all these people come to life. They're real people. But in the movie, they're just shadows. Without them, nothing happens. Whew. You know, tens of millions of Americans every year, they stay up to watch the Academy Awards. I've always loved the role of Best Supporting Actor. You know, because I think I understand that role. Many of us do. Not always being on the poster, not always being in the limelight, but nevertheless being there, essential to the unfolding of a story. Makes me think about the many service groups here at our center. You might call them supporting actors. And to many of us, they're just shadows. We don't even know their names. Like our spiritual care group who visit people who are sick. Who are they? Or the people who staff our telephone prayer ministry, who pray with people they may never hear from again, whose names they will never know. Or our video ministry team that work tirelessly behind the scenes to create video content that finds its way into thousands of households, sometimes tens of thousands of households in Central and Latin America. People who we will never meet. Or like our bulletin and printed material and web team volunteers who are going about making sure that bulletin you have in your hand, that workbook that you've got in the class comes to you, who check the grammar. They're just shadows. And yet people's lives are changed in the class. Or like our prison ministry volunteers who go in and help change heartbreak into the action of showing up in a place where somebody can be seen and loved and welcomed. Or like our Sunday morning parking volunteers who put the cones out and make sure everything is in its right place. Who are they? They're just shadows. Or our Project Sleepwarm volunteer, our receptionists, our bookstore volunteers, our sweepers and cleaners and gardeners, and our youth program volunteer teachers. The crew that is working solidly in the background, contributing what is theirs to contribute without ever knowing the exact impact of a single simple thing that they do. Our center does the same thing. We are a supporting role for many people in the world. Through our nonprofit program, we give every year to 12 nonprofit organizations. You know about that, right? And we've been doing it for many years. So Jan Davis, a while ago, collected a list of them. It's too long and too fast to read it all, but I want to give you an idea of what we've been doing. And that's not including this year. Now, I wanted to show that to you for a couple of reasons. First of all, because it makes me feel warm and fuzzy. But also because it helps me remember that you and I, as individuals, we're not able to always just get up, quit our jobs, and sign up to do the work that all of those organizations are doing. So we do what we can, we give what we can so that other people can do what they can, so that the kind of work that supports our shared values can take place. And here we are, working in the background of that happening, sometimes not knowing about the impact of our work. We're supporting actors, sometimes not knowing that the person that we are pulling up is a flowing prophet that will one day do something great that we cannot ourselves do. Not always knowing that $1, that act of generosity will change everything for somebody somewhere. Once a director of one of these nonprofit organizations came and told us their leadership team was sitting in a meeting and they were discussing how to close the program because they had lost hope and funding. And in that meeting, the mail was delivered and our check was there. And even though it was a modest check, it opened the windows of their heart and they said we should continue. Rabbi Kushner, in his book, Living a Life That Matters, he talks to us in that book about the movie A Wonderful Life, which you may be familiar with. It's the story of George Bailey, a small-town banker who always does the right thing. Always does the right thing. He's generous and kind, and nevertheless, his business is about to fail. And he gets into thinking that maybe it would be better if he just committed suicide. And then an angel appears, a stranger, at a critical moment and shows him how the world most certainly would not be better off had he never been born. Small actions, even small actions in the normal activity of doing his duties at work, the angel shows, had a radical benefit on individual lives, but also for society in general. That's what the angel shows him. Still, I can see how we might yearn to do something epic, mythic, to make a difference. I can see how we might be concerned about not doing enough. How do small things count? Because this world looks like it's in a mess. Thornton Wilder's novel, The Eighth Day, he gives us a helpful image to understand it of a tapestry. Because from one side, a tapestry is a beautiful thing. Oh my goodness, it's an intricately woven artwork using thread of different color to make an inspiring picture. But turn it around, look at the other side, and you see a mess of many threads, some short, some long, some cut, some pushed in, and some going off in this direction and that direction. And when you look at the back at the tapestry, you might be able to kind of make out the outline of what the picture is supposed to be, but not the glory that is on the right side. Sometimes I think this world is on the wrong side of a beautiful tapestry. Sometimes I experience my life like that. That's when I'm looking at the backside of things, and why? Well, it could be because the pain is too much, or the loss too great, or the road too steep. So when that's happening now, I tell myself, I know now that plenty is hidden from me on this journey. Maybe because my consciousness is still growing, and now I know that sometimes I will understand a thing later that I could not understand while it was happening. So I remind myself when it is happening. I tell myself there is a bigger picture. I tell myself there is a pattern that is merely hidden from me right now. I remind myself I am in the right place at the right time, successfully engaged in the right activity, like Florence Scovel Shinn taught us to say. I am in the right place at the right time, successfully engaged in the right activity for myself, but not only that. For someone else I don't even know is being impacted. And what kind of impact is that? There may be some choice in that. I remember visiting a school friend. He moved to England. We grew up together in South Africa. And I went over to visit him, and he said, Edward, my brother's coming over. He heard you're coming, and he's so excited to meet you. I had forgotten that he had a brother, because the age difference was so large. He was a little one when we were in school together, so he was sort of like an extra. And the doorbell rang, and in came this little guy, and he said, Edward, it is so good to see you. You're my hero. And I said, thank you. Why? He said, oh, well, because, you were so amazing at school. You always bucked the system. You were such a rebel, and you never got caught smoking, and then you always got out of class. And I went, oh, thank you. I didn't even know he was watching. At the graduation yesterday from the School of Spiritual Leadership, where we graduated 5 new ministers yesterday, the speaker was Dr. Deborah Johnson, one of our favorite guest speakers. And she said something at that graduation speech that was so wonderful. She reminded us that you and I are breathing the breath of life into everything we put out there, because of what lives in us. And she reminded the new ministers to let their light shine and to not be overly concerned with whether someone deserved their light or not, but to shine it like the sun shines on the just and the unjust equally. And what I got out of that speech was this reminder, Edward, don't be too concerned about being the biggest, bestest, brightest light. Don't be overly concerned with being epic, mythological. Instead, be concerned with being the light that was created to uniquely be you. Because we may not know that the part we are playing is relevant to a much, much bigger picture. Tom Brokaw wrote a book, The Greatest Generation, in which he includes the recollection of people who fought in World War II. It's like interviews. And these people interviewed in the book had horrific experiences, massive loss, and tremendous violence. And instead of the book being filled up with complaints and regret, what comes through in the book is this pride at having played some part in helping the world be a little better place. And that's not the most fascinating thing about the book. The most fascinating thing about the book is only a few people interviewed were lead actors of epic proportion, generals and medal winners and captains. No, most were just regular old ordinary people, women and men and soldiers, nurses, pilots, doing their part. Best supporting actors. Some might even have experienced them as extras, without which, Now, you may not know why you are in the situation you are in, or what may come of it, or how the part you are playing factors in. But I invite you to think on this, that the movie is not complete without you. You may not have the lead role, and it may be incomprehensible to you that the actions that you're involved in could possibly make a difference to somebody you don't even know is watching. But I invite you to think that there is an other side to your tapestry. John Cousins, a blogger, writes this about the tapestry. So, what of the back then? Should we criticize its messiness? Should we snip off all the hanging threads? Should we somehow try to tidy it up? Well, Again, not really. The structure of the tapestry's reverse is what makes the front work so well. It's what holds it all together. It's what gives the work its shape and form. Perhaps there are elements of your own makeup which you may wish were different. Perhaps there are episodes of your life that you long to have been able to handle differently. But, and it's a big but, isn't it those loose threads and uneven stitches which have been instrumental in making you who you are today? Instead of unproductively wishing you could change the unchangeable, maybe there's merit in recognizing their value, celebrating them even. In fact, here's wholeheartedly to the messy background embroidery that got you to where you are today. It's all part of the two sides of life's rich tapestry. I invite you to take a deep breath in with me and exhale, letting your eyes close as we turn within for a moment of prayer in which each one of us acknowledges the divine in our own way according to our own tradition. I acknowledge the divine as the living Spirit Almighty, one presence in and through all creation, above and below, across all times and in all locations. And I begin there to describe this presence as everywhere present, so I can remember that it is where I am, as it is for every person here. So that I can remember and identify with the idea that I dwell in spirit, that I am the inheritor of its bounty. This way, I realize that the love in my heart is an expression of the infinite love of creation. That the wisdom that intuitively guides me when I turn to it is a function of the infinite intelligence of this magnificent cosmos. That way I remember that the connection I feel to all life binds me to all that is. And that lets me realize that everything is holy. And so I acknowledge that with reverence and humility, even though I may not always be able to see it, there is that within me which knows it and accepts it and cherishes it, this idea that holiness is present. And so today, through this prayer, I confirm it for me and for anyone who agrees with it. And I remember to rejoice in it even before I see things as they truly are. And I trust this spiritual universe to conduct me in such a way that my life in the next steps reflects this prayer. This I claim for me and for everyone in hearing range of this prayer. And together we say, and so it is.